may I request Mr. Abhinav Prakash and Mr. Nithin Sridhar to occupy their chairs on the dais. Let us start the program with a brief introduction. We have with us Mr. Abhinav Prakash. He's an assistant professor, University of Delhi, and he's one of the famous TV panelists. He works for the upliftment of the downtrodden and Dalits, and he is also known as a Dalit thinker, I can say so. And we have with us Mr. Nithin Sridhar. He's a civil engineer based in Mysore. He writes on plethora of issues, right from politics to spirituality. He has also authored a book, Musings on Hinduism, and he's an editor of indiafacts.org. With this brief introduction, over to the panelists. Over to Mr. Sridhar. Yeah.
So today's topic is Hindu civilization under siege or on upsurge. I think we are today in a very important point in our entire history for our civilization. We have a long history of invasions and colonialism, etc. Though we celebrated our independence few decades back, we are still not free in the mind, and it is this freedom of the mind that we need to struggle now. So Hindu civilization is under a very confusing, very churning moment now. So that is why it is necessary to ask ourselves, are we under siege? What are the challenges? Is there a silver lining? And I would request Abhinavji to open with his comments on this.
Thank you, Sridhar. First of all, I would like to say how delighted I am to be in Karnataka. This is my second time in the Karnataka. Last time was 5 years back, and this is first time at Mangaluru. And while I was reading about Mangaluru, I find something very interesting, that according to various myths and legends, it is supposed that Sri Ram was once the lord of the region, Kannada region, and I come from Faizabad, where Shri Ayodhya is located. And also I found that there is a very strong connection with the Nath Sampradaya, with the district. And coming from UP, where we also have Jogi of Nath Sampradaya, now the Chief Minister of the state. And also something very interesting that, which Nithin told me, that this region is known as the area reclaimed by Parshuram from the sea. And according to one of the myths of my caste, we are also descendant of the Parshuram. So it's a very, very strong connection which I didn't know existed between me coming from Faizabad, that is Ayodhya, and Mangaluru. But that's also the point. That also tells you something about what is Hindu civilization and what is Hindu sphere. All the caste and communities cutting across the region are connected to each other via these traditions, myths and legends, which is often not recognized by many. So coming back to your point when you said that, is this civilization under siege or are we on upsurge? Well, I'd like to say that if you take a long view, what is happening today? See, after almost a millennia, the Hindus have their own country and their own state. You are at least politically free. You compare the situation today with the situation just 100 and 150 years back. The things were looking hopeless. I don't know how many of you know about the Great War of Independence of 1857, because that was mostly located in the North India. And what the British did, if you just go back 150 years back, when they were conquering the Awadh region, the entire Lucknow and what you call the UP, their conduct was so barbaric. I mean, they had slaughtered lakhs of people. I mean, there's no count to the people they have slaughtered, even after winning the Awadh province. And after that, they started snatching away the children of the parents and putting them in the Christian missionary schools. And they declared a whole range of castes and tribes as the criminal caste and tribes because they resisted the British conquest. Now, you are coming from that situation just a century back. As a Hindu society, as a Hindu civilization, you do not have this kind of anarchy and chaos in your land anymore, which has given you a great window to rebuild, to restore and heal the society. And what you are seeing today is that After a very long time, you have one of the most powerful armies under your control. You have one of the most powerful economy under your control. You have one of the most powerful state in the world under your control. Now, of course, there are challenges what to do with this army, what to do with this economy and state. But the point is that at least you have a state now, which is a big change from the previous centuries. And I believe that what we're seeing today is that after, say, 5, 6, 7 decades of independence, it takes time. You're coming from a situation. I mean, how many of you know about the Birla Temple in Delhi? Birla Temple in Delhi? When was it inaugurated? When was it inaugurated? No. It was 1932, I guess, by Gandhi. That was the first Hindu temple built in Delhi since the period of Delhi Sultanate. Since the period of Delhi Sultanate, Birla Temple was the first Hindu temple built in the city of Delhi. Now you see that where you're coming from. Now it takes time for a society which has undergone such devastation, such chaos and anarchy, to rebuild and to heal and to come to that mindset where you can be confident about yourself. What we are seeing today in 21st century, that confidence again. Our parents' generation was far more defensive. I mean, they were always trying to become like West. They were always trying to learn from the West. But now you see the debate and discourse even in this West. It's all about challenging the West, not copying them. That's a great change in the mindset, and that is a great change in the trajectory of the Hindu civilization, which we often tend to underplay. Also, you have, after a very long time, you have a society which is far more stronger than before, because as I agree with the panelists in the last session, that India as a nation state is a 20th century construct, because the concept of nation state itself is a modern construct. Even the European states are only 100, 200 years back. So for the first time, all the parts of this region, all the parts of the civilization are under a strong centralized political entity called Republic of India. That is not a small thing. Recently, we have just unveiled the Statue of Unity. What Patel achieved is what the emperors and kings for millennia have tried to achieve, to unite all the parts of Hindu civilization under a single empire, under a single political entity. Imagine what you have achieved in the last 50, 60 years, and do not underplay, as many people say, we are under siege. Definitely we are under challenged. But my point is that when we were not, we try to think some kind of ancient era as a golden age. But I don't buy in the theory of golden age, because, golden ages always exist in the past.
You have given a very positive picture, but unfortunately I do not share the optimism fully. Yes, every cloud has a silver lining, and there is a silver lining, and you have well noted them down. But I think we should not underestimate the challenges we are facing. Yes, we are no longer living in under Islamic rule or under colonialism. And our challenges are different from what was there. But still, we are also facing an attack, so to speak, from many different quarters. I'll just like to point out a few of them. I would start with the burning issue of Sabrimala. It pains me that we have come to a stage where we have to come on the streets to fight for our deities, our devatas. A lot of people are aware of the Rajiv Malhotra's work on Breaking India. I say the real target of the Breaking India forces is Hindu Dharma, Sanatana Dharma. They are the dismantling Hinduism forces, and we need to recognize it for that. There is a huge judicial activism for dismantling practices, Hindu practices one by one. In Sabrimala, the narrative created was of gender equality, where there is no scope in as far as Sabrimala concerned. It's not a gender issue at all to begin with. Similarly, we have in Karnataka itself a huge negative narrative was created against Madesnana. It was portrayed as caste discrimination, inhuman practice. While on the ground fact was that it was a voluntary practice, it was based on the faith, it was based on certain principles of austerity, and most importantly, it was a voluntary thing people did on their own. Nobody imposed it. Similarly, we have now an attempt to dismantle steady map and then perhaps dismantle Kumbh Mela. Lot of evangelical forces are already working, they are converting people of the community who row the boats on the Ganges, and lot of stuff are happening. And actually this is nothing new. All of it, this is some complete copy paste, that the modus operandi is what was applied by a colonial state with the sati, the same modus operandi of choosing a practice and demonizing it using various narratives. It may be women's rights, animal rights, it may be pollutions, and now Diwali crackers cause pollution, the agarbatti we light cause pollution, the very act of cremating our dead cause pollution, but industries can continue to pollute the Ganges, nobody cares, right? So, and then we have the issue of Christianization of Bharatanatyam, Karnataka music. So these are serious issues, and there are, yes, as I agree with you that there is a silver lining, and for example, I can say about increased interest in the yoga, Ayurveda, Sanskrit. These are all positive things, but each come with their own serious challenges. Like yoga is being dismantled in the West from their roots in India. Now lot of academic work are there in the West which says the modern asana yoga, because they don't understand our yoga, they consider asana as yoga, they say it is a borrowing from the West gymnasium. That is their academic theory. So these are real challenges, and before I want to discuss with you one important aspect as far as challenges are concerned, because for the free development, for our revival of our civilization, for moving forward, we cannot ignore the challenges. And one I want to discuss with you is the demographic changes. And I would like your comments on this serious issue. We are seeing lot of conversions, lot of Islamization. District by district, the demography is being changed. We have lost lot of districts already in Bengal, Kerala, and Kanyakumari belt, and all those Chhattisgarh, etc. And according to some researchers who have done statistical study, by 2050, a large portion of India, Hindus will be a minority. And this is a serious civilizational issue which cannot be ignored. I would like your comments on it.
Well, thank you, Nithin. Well, I agree to this part of demographic change, because if you look at the map of Indian subcontinent, all the areas which are Muslim majority today, which is your Punjab, Sindh, Kashmir, Bengal and northern Bihar, even 1,000 years back they were not Hindu majority, they were mostly Buddhist majority. So the Hindus have not really lost the religious debate or the political debate with their rulers and the invaders who came from outside, but where you have lost is basically on the demographic front, because it's very difficult to destroy or defeat something like Hinduism, but it can be eradicated by simply killing off the people. And I agree that in the last 200 years we have lost more territory than we have lost in our entire history. I think this is for the first time that there are no Hindus left in Sindh. When partition happened, around 30% population of Sindh was Hindu, right? And Sindh was the first area conquered by the Muslim rulers. So same with the Afghanistan. I mean, up until 1980s, you still have a noticeable population of Hindus in Kandahar and Kabul, but now you have almost none. So I agree that demographic change is a huge problem, but the point is that what to do about it. I don't think that much can be done, honestly speaking, because you can't go and force people to reproduce. I mean, you just can't do that. The force of modernity and the economic transformation are against you. And they will also impact the other communities as well, but at a slower rate, as we have seen. What you can do is that you have to ask a very pertinent question, and which was asked also by many people in the past, is that why has Hinduism stopped being a missionary religion? Why have you stopped converting the people? Right? Because it's not that Hinduism became a dominant religion in the subcontinent without conversion. They were missionaries, they were different sampradayas, going to different places, converting people to their creed. In the period of Shah Jahan, there are petitions from across the Mughal Empire to the emperor saying, stop the Hindus, they are converting Muslims. It was the role of the Bhakti movement. So Bhakti movement started converting lots of people. But we have to ask why we have stopped doing that. Because anything which does not expand can only collapse. Right? There is no status quo in the world. So it's a problem deep-rooted inside the Hindu theology and the religion itself, that all your gurus and all these rock star yoga gurus, the first thing they say, do not convert to Hinduism, conversion is bad. And I take objection to that point. I say you should convert if you think that your religion has something to offer to the people. You should be open about it, right? You should be open to welcoming people. If you don't welcome people, you will lose people, as simple as that. So simply talking about the demography does not lead to anywhere because you really can't stop it.
I think I agree with you, but this inhibition of certain acharyas and gurus or certain organizations, I think this is based on a very improper or incorrect understanding of our own tradition and shastras, because there are texts which speak about which give a ritual mechanism for reconversion, and Diksha, and there are certain austerities mentioned for that, because basically what we are doing is reconversion, and our theological basis is that you are born into Sanatana Dharma, you become fallen, you do not become converted. Its conversion concept is not there, just you are fallen and you can anytime join back the mainstream with certain small ritual or whatever it is. So I think there is a lack of understanding of this crucial issue in demography. And returning back to this Sabrimala, I want to make another point. Now Ayodhya issue has been again raised. It is a long-standing issue. And I think as a civilization, it is a very unfortunate and painful thing that we are still fighting for a temple in Ayodhya. And now the women in Kerala have been forced to come out on the streets to fight for Sabrimala. So does it not show a deeper deeper malice in Hindu society, that we have emptied our hearts from our devatas, from our deities, that we no longer have a space for Ramlala or Ayyappa in our hearts. Because if there was space in the heart, then it would have manifested on the ground and there would not have been so much political debates. So somehow this, I believe, this is related to the colonization and the continued process of colonization in our education system. That people become deracinated, they are made deracinated, and we are still following this English based and a colonial narrative of education which completely isolates every person, every new generation person from their own civilization. What do you think?
No, I agree to your point, but as I've said, it takes some time to decolonize. You can't expect that to happen within 50, 60 years if you take a long view. But I agree to your broad point. See, what is happening in the Sabrimala case, the most dangerous point of the judgment was where it says that the followers of a deity cannot be accorded protection under the Constitution. We cannot treat that as a religion. Now, by doing so, the Supreme Court has simply demolished any legal protection available to any Hindu. Because in Hinduism, we basically worship deities, right? So all of us have our own traditions and sects and gods and goddesses to worship. But as a Shakta, I cannot sacrifice animal to my goddess because that is banned, but that is allowed to the other side during the Bakrid. This is a problem because you are not recognized as a religion. And that is why I also I also have problem with lots of people who say that Hinduism is not a religion but a way of life. Because by saying that Hinduism is not a religion, you are simply making sure that tomorrow someone will come and say you are not entitled to any right because you are not a religion. In the world dominated by the nation states, in the world dominated by the religion, you have to become one, right? If you avoid that debate, say in most of the countries outside India, the Hinduism has no legal recognition. You're not considered as a religion. Within India also, you are trying to argue the same thing. Every day, every politician stands up and say, Hinduism is not a religion. It's a way of life. I want to ask, is it like an American way of life or what? What are you trying to argue? So we have to be more strategic and, I will say, more practical about these things, especially the legal aspect. And I agree to your broad point about how we look at the religion now is largely informed by the modernity, which has its root in the Western Abrahamic traditions. So I will say that what is happening today is that judiciary has become an institution using which people can enact law for rest of us. Like, I have not chosen the judges, I have not elected them. Judges have no power to make laws for me, but still they are doing so, right? There's a case of judicial overreach. There's a problem of institution. But what is happening? Someone can come and file a PIL, and that will become the law for me. So that's a different level of problem altogether. There's a political problem which is being exploited by some other people to impose restrictions upon you. So you have to be, more politically. You have to beat them in the political game. It's not that people have lost faith. I don't see that. Across the India you go, the festivals are becoming bigger and grander. I live in Delhi, right? In Delhi, every colony celebrates every festival throughout the year. Even if they don't know what it is all about, they will celebrate it. That has happened in the last 10, 15 years. That wasn't there before that. So Hinduism is again cool among the younger generation. It's no longer the generation of 80s and 70s. So you have you walk into any bookstore nowadays, all you see, all the books are written are either on Hindu mythology or Hindu epics or based in Indic legends and myths. So that is already happening. It's already a cool thing. What is lacking with the Hindus is we lack the political sophistication, and which has to be cultivated and which comes over time, because for so long we have not exercised the political power. So we feel clueless once we have it.
I slightly agree. I mostly agree with you, but slightly disagree. Yes, a lot of festivals are happening. A lot of us do practice festivals that our parents have practiced. But somehow down the line, we have lost touch with our roots, especially our knowledge roots. One good example is how many people actually realize that in Deepavali, when the light is lit, what it represents. Or similarly, when in Navaratri the 9 nights are celebrated, when we worship the Divine Mother, how many actually realize it? A lot of us take it as a holiday. Some people go with their families to tourism and all those such stuff. And even those who practice, one example I will give, because I have been working on this, is Rajaswala Dharma. Today, the huge narrative, especially in the context of Shabarimala, it was built that Hindu philosophy is anti-women because it perceives menstruation as impurity and it has oppresses women through all this isolation and etc. But the fact is, what the left don't tell and what the Hindus themselves don't know is that the language of impurity is an English term and it has a lot of Abrahamic baggage. But our own Sanskrit term in the Shastras is Ashaucha, and it has something to do with competency and not in a negative sense of a degradation. There is no meaning of degradation as far as this is concerned. But how many actually know? I mean, in lot of homes, parents used to practice certain Rajaswala Dharma, the menstruation practices. But children, they said, you do it, and some did, some did not do. It has not passed on. But the knowledge itself has completely missing even when people are practicing. So while in the external aspect, some amount of things are continuing and we celebrate, we do big Ganapati pujas in Maharashtra and all these things are happening, but somehow there is a disconnect as far as knowledge is concerned, knowledge of our traditions, our philosophy, our civilization and what we do and why we do it. And this is somehow, I think, is related to lot of issues. The best example is when Shabarimala happened. For a long time, from the RSS, BJP, we had very conflicting views. The central leadership simply failed to understand the issue until the women came out on the street. But those women have been fighting for 2 years. The court battle, the ready to wait movement was 2 years old, and they filed the case, intervention petitions, everything happened. But there was no support. Only when the women finally had to come out on the street that support came. So there is a deep lack of knowledge of our civilization, and I think we cannot simply wish it away. As you said, decolonization cannot happen, but I'm not sure that it is even started. And because more and more new generation, as they come out of the colleges, it is not even higher education of the humanities where people become completely brainwashed with the left ideology. But even in a very primary and higher primary education, when you come out, you're completely into this equality, rights. They're completely Western frameworks. Why are we there? Nobody is asking question, what is of the framework of dharma? Do our textbooks even have a term dharma when they teach us? There is no scope for that. So I think a lot of our civilizational issues are somehow connected to this education system being completely isolated from our Indian knowledge systems and traditions.
Well, I agree to the broad point you are trying to make, but I would also say that the religion as practiced by the masses is never pure, and I don't think even in the past, when the majority of the people were practicing their religion, they had very good knowledge about the philosophical basis and all. So you have to understand that you cannot make impossible demands upon the people that everyone who is practicing a religion is well versed in all the shastras and all.
But what I have found, that in the rural folk, there is a real deep understanding in a very commonsensical way.
I was coming to that.
Yeah.
So what is actually there is that what actually has dominated the practice of Hinduism is the folk traditions, right? Your local customs, local traditions, and people understand that. And I agree, somehow that is being challenged. So attack on Sabrimala is basically attack on a local tradition which is very powerful. And the Kumbh Mela, as you also pointed out, when the British, after the 1857 rebellion, when the declaration of the Queen of England was read, that now the crown is taking over India, that was read in Kumbh Mela, right? The British did not read it from Kolkata or from Delhi. They announced it from the Kumbh Mela because they understood what Kumbh Mela represents. So I agree to that point, the broad point you were making, but I'm saying that, you see, the majority do not understand nuances of the things. Even if they are follower of a religion, even if they are Muslims or Christians, they don't. You talk to the people, most of them only have some sketchy knowledge about what they are doing. Second point is that as you become more and more modern, and as the India's economy continue to grow, as you start undergoing economic transformation, lots of the old traditions will come under pressure automatically, without anyone playing the game. You cannot expect India to become a $10 trillion, $20 trillion economy and think that the social structures and customs will remain the same as today. So that is the task of the religious institutions of Hinduism, different sampradayas, their mutts and all, to decide how to cope up with this transformation, because it's coming. We are already on an inflection point where India will stop being that rural agrarian society. You are very fast becoming an urban, industrial, modern society, which will cause lots of disruption in lots of old traditions, right? So, and this is the same point which I made earlier, and you also made it. You said that people do not have religious knowledge. My point is that, which I said, that even your religious institutions, these sampradayas and mutt, there is a problem. They are not passing it along. So lots of mutts in, at least in North India, Ayodhya, say I come from Faizabad, most of these mutts are really, I will not use any harsh term, but there's no point of them existing. Right? They are simply real estate now. So no one really care about any bhakti tradition, because it's basically a bhakti tradition of Ram. Different mutts, they don't have any knowledge in them which they can pass on to the next generation. It's simply controlling the real estate, and that's it. So that has to be tackled as a very far more deeper problem. And last point which I want to say is that Vivekananda, he responded to the West in the last to last century. But that also created a problem which is often not discussed. What Vivekananda used was the language of Advait to counter the Christianity and the West. And since that time, the discourse of Hinduism has been dominated by the language of Advaita, which has led to marginalization of other schools of Hinduism and other traditions of Hinduism. And now Advaita itself has become a scapegoat for most of the people. So it has become an excuse for the people, urban people. Well, I believe in Advaita, I do not believe in discrimination, so it doesn't matter. I don't practice any customs and religion, but I am a believer in Advaita. So there is a philosophical degeneration within the Hinduism. Now, why they fear Nath Sampradaya so much, the left, right? When the yogi became the chief minister of UP, suddenly you were flooded with the articles about how Nath Sampradaya is not a Hindu Sampradaya. It's a heretic, it's a heterodox Sampradaya. Because if you look at the history of last millennia in the North India, Nath Sampradaya is one of the traditions which has contested Islam face to face. Right? Wherever you had a Sufi Khanka, in the front of that Sufi Khanka, next to that, you will have a dera of Nath Sampradaya. Nath Sampradaya was perhaps the only sect which has deconstructed the religious text of Islam. I mean, Hindus are more of a gentleman people, so we never call out the text of other people that what is Bible saying, what is Quran saying. But Nath Sampradaya did so. And it was a militant organization. You know the reason why it was so militant? Because it was rooted in the subalterns of this country. So before Aditnath and his uncle, no Mahant of Gorakhnath Mandir was an upper caste person. It was always OBCs or Dalits. They were running this mutt. And they were so militant against this entire foreign religions and all, that even today there's a fear of Nath Sampradaya. They do not fear the mutts of Advaita, but they fear Nath Sampradaya because they know these people are really going to tackle them on the battlefield. So we have to revive all these traditions which have been marginalized in the Hindu community, which are folk traditions, like Sabrimala is one. Nath Sampradaya in the north is a very big tradition. There are lots of traditions in the Punjab. If you can somehow bring them, revive them again, you will actually create a shield for the future because they're also directly connected to the masses.
You made very well point. Just a clarification, as a staunch Advaitin myself, I would like to say that this is actually a distortion of Advaita Vedanta, or pseudo Vedanta I would like to call. Because just an example, you take any Shankaracharya of any met, they are completely in rituals. They do their achara every day, 2 times, 3 times puja they do, they worship the deities. They have written poetry on various deities. So their rituals, this avoidance, apathy towards ritual is a pseudo Vedanta. It is not real Vedanta.
I agree to that.
Yeah, but on the larger point, I agree with you. Especially the fact that we need to revive our local traditions. See, I think this is the very nuanced issue that today, even in especially the urban educated people, there is a wrong understanding of Hinduism as a very particular way of homogenized version. I mean, it's a product of our history that when we were in face to face with Christianity and Islam, there were movements like Arya Samaj, etc., which wanted to create a homogenized version of Hinduism as a response to that. Whatever may be the users' advantages at that moment, now it has created a time when lot of people fail to understand what is at stake at Sabarimala, simply because the practices of the temple is very different from our homogenized version of Hinduism that is actually portrayed in media or writings of popular authors or whatever it may be. And another point I would like to go back is again to the colonial education system. Britishers were a very intelligent people, I say, because they deliberately dismantled the entire traditional education system. Now the reason why a lot of folk traditions, the knowledge has lost, for a very simple example is the Dharmashastra tradition. Where is the Dharmashastra tradition? There is no tradition alive. There may be teachers here and there, very few of them, but the living tradition, it It's nowhere there. We need to revive it. So we need to revive all these, except for the Vedanta. I think every other aspect, the Agama, they are surviving very little bit, but we need to revive them. A mass revival of Indian knowledge systems, knowledge, various vidyas. In our tradition, even cooking was considered a Pakashastra. But today the narrative is the women who go out to work are liberated. Women who choose to become mothers, who choose to cook food, is someone who is looked upon as inferior. And so that is a modernity's narrative. No matter, you made a point about modernization, which is being a reality, but I would like to say, modernization does not mean westernization. It should not mean westernization. Unfortunately, we are taking it as westernization. So this westernized modernity, I have serious issues. There are a lot of issues with it, but beyond the scope. I would just take up another point now. It's a point of Article 26 to 30. Recently, some intellectuals, Hindu thinkers met and they brought out a Hindu Charter of Demands. Now, the very first and the most important demand is passing this, Dr. Satyapal Singh's private member bill for the amending of the Articles 26 to 30. Which will help us to, manage our own education systems and free the temples from government interference. What are your comments on this?
Well, I largely agree to the entire charter, especially on the educational institute. See, what happens once you start imposing these kinds of rules? Who bears the burden of such rules? Someone from Bihar, a friend from Bihar, told me that many schools have shut down under the right to education in Bihar because they did not fulfill the criteria. Most of the schools were basically run by the OBCs and the Dalits, because they do not have money, they do not have funds, so they were running local schools, educating their own people, but simply the government comes and say, you have to fulfill this criteria, that criteria, this criteria, which they cannot because they don't have money. I mean, they anyways working with the poor society, you simply shut them down. Now, large number of people are out of school, where will they go? Suddenly a Christian missionary school will come and they will capture away those students. So I agree to that point, and as I always say, many times on Twitter as well, if British had instituted the right to education bill, Savitribai Phule would have never been able to open her school. This is what is at stake here. And I agree that, this is a bizarre law in Indian constitution that, provision, not law in the constitution, that somehow the Hindus can't run their own institutions and others can. Either the law should be that everyone can't run, if you are a secular state, or law should be that everyone can run the constitution. But this whole thing of making laws, we have failed to see how it impacts differentially the different sections of the society. So I think a better case is made if you are able to prove that it's the masses who are suffering from the right to education. So far, statistically, we have failed to prove that. And because this is how you actually go to the court and say, well, the majority of the poor people are suffering, majority of the marginalized people are suffering because of that law, then that becomes a political issue, then that becomes an issue in which some action will be taken. Similarly, right now, we are only talking about that it is discriminatory, no one is willing to listen to us. Also, you talked also about these Advaita, right? It's coming back. So I don't have a problem, right? Different schools have existed. So I understand what you were trying to say, but I'm saying that dominance of Advaita in the language of modern Hinduism, which I see as a problem, as someone who is not from that tradition. So yes, and also we have to see something which is happening over the last 10-15 years, is that you really have a growth of a very powerful middle class in India, and this middle class actually had the Hindu consciousness, right? If you go to the villages, people mostly have caste consciousness. So if you go to Bihar, the BJP lost very badly in Bihar, but BJP was able to win in Gujarat because of this middle class thing. So because the more you have urbanization, the more Hindu society is going to become more strengthened, but that will also create problems like your traditions and customs will come under stress. Now coming to Sabrimala, which you spoke of earlier, you said BJP did not act it in time. See, any political party only acts when there's pressure from the ground. If you don't have numbers on your side, no one will act. No party will act, right? Lots of people accused Chief Minister of Maharashtra as being insensitive to the cause of temple entry and all those things. But the point is that this is a harsh reality. There is a mass support for there was a mass support for the entry of women in the temples where they are not allowed to. Because of misinformation, because of lack of understanding, for whatever reason, there is a support. So a politician will respond to that support, not to you who is sitting on Twitter and saying something or writing an article, unless and until, like in the case of Sabrimala, you can demonstrate that. So that street power, that political play has to be learned if you want to push the cause. If you want to push the cause of temple entry, if you want to, control of temple or the control of educational institutions, there has to be a groundswell for support. I remember when Samajwadi Party was in power in UP, they tried to overtake the Vindhyachal Mandir and the Bake Bihari Mandir in Mathura, and BJP opposed it. But the public support was with the Samajwadi Party, not with the BJP. Right? So BJP had to back down. And the reason is very simple to see. I mean, no one likes to go to Banki Bihari temple when it is being managed by the local trust and all, because it's so bad. If you have been to Baki Mathura, you can understand what I'm trying to say. When Vindhyachal Devi is my Kul Devi, we did not spoke anything when the government tried to take it over, because we know it's horrific to go to the temple under the present condition. Because when it is controlled by the government, ironically, the things improve in the terms of infrastructure, management and all, but long-term damage is done. But people do not see the long-term, right? People only see the short-term. So you have to actually educate the people, get the masses on your side. If you can bring 2 lakh people on the ground, say don't take over the temple or free this temple, next day all the political parties will do that. That happened in JNU a couple of years back. You know this Mahishasur Day controversy? I'm pretty sure many of you know about it. So we have been opposing it for a long time, but 1 year it actually crossed all the limits because forward press and everyone got involved. And there was a massive protest called by just one random person, Hindu student protest. So more than 1,000 students came in the night and protested against it. Next day, all these ISA, SFI, they took U-turn. So ISA actually brought out the poster condemning Mahishasur Day, which was the main patron of the Mahishasur Day. It condemned it. So unless until you can demonstrate that you have public on your side in the real term, nothing is going to change in the democratic politics.
I think the gist from your suggestion is, as long as Hindu people, the common people like us, are sleeping in our homes, none of our problems are actually going to be addressed, irrespective of the government that is there. And we have to take responsibility to save our deities, to save our traditions, to save our knowledge systems, and come out on the streets to protest. Right?
Agree. It's a democracy, it's a political game. If you can't play political game, you have no right to complain.
But this comes to the other aspect of the issue is, there are serious forces. We have a lot of foreign funding by various foreign agencies, various foreign nations. We have funding Breaking India forces, Islamic forces in play, evangelism in play, and urban Naxals. Vivek Agnihotri was speaking about how the extortion money by the jungle Naxals is then used for supporting the urban Naxals. So there is a limit to what a common man can do. There is a lot of scope. There is a lot of things that only someone that can be done from the top down, from the people in power. So these are all both national issues as well as civilizational issues. That, as I said, all these Breaking India forces are actually dismantling Hinduism forces. Their actual target is Sanatana Dharma and all its varied branches, and they want to cut it one by one, hoping that one day the whole tree dies down. So where in 2014, one of the reasons for the mandate of the current government was not just the economics, but also civilization. So why is a large section of Hindu society is feeling a lot of anger, dissatisfaction, and a sense that the civilizational issues has not been addressed. And why, I am sure when we people can know that there is a civilizational war going, of course the people at the top do realize it, know it, and there must be, why is there inaction in, what's your opinion on this?
Well, I don't think there is inaction per se, because you see what this government has done over the last 4 or 5 years. You have actually rolled back the Naxalism. You have made sure there is no terror attack outside Kashmir, which itself is a great achievement because you have controlled the direct consequences of the war, this war you're talking about. Now, the government focus is, for the last 4 years, and I have my disagreements on lots of policies, but has been to rebuild the grounds of prosperity. So they are actually empowering the poor, because one thing which we fail to talk about in this civilization narrative, your civilization is as strong as the last man in your civilization, right? So once you start empowering the people on the bottom ladder of a society, in the long run you are creating a base which can actually fight back. So I don't think that the current leadership is unaware of these issues. Perhaps there's too much on their plate, and perhaps there's too much to bother them to actually go into each and everything. They have to pick and choose their battle. So either you counter China in its game, or you fight a long civilizational war with the West, or you find the immediate war with the Western, the Islamic world. But yeah, there is a lack of capacity in the Hindu society itself. So you lack the political sophistication, you lack the strategic mindset, because let me say, the Muslim world has never put the entire weight after you, right? So the moment the Sunni hierarchy tries to destroy India, it will be a tough time for you. So right now they are busy fighting with the West, right? So that is a scary scenario, because as a society I know, the instant coffee generation of Delhi and Mumbai can't withstand a war like Baghdad, right? You have to give it to people of Iraq that they fought for years. They can fight civil war for years and still survive. You have to give it to the people of Syria that they can fight Islamic State and still survive. I was in serious doubt about the Hindus' capacity to fight for 10 weeks, right? If you are under that situation. So that's a very long process. So blaming the current government simply is not going to work. You have to have a long play. So as someone said, that even Rahul Gandhi, stop lampooning Rahul Gandhi, try to send your people in the team of the Rahul Gandhi, right? Because he's surrounded by the communists and Naxals and everyone. So there should be right-wing Hindu people in his team who can actually control the damage, if not guide him to the right direction. So that's a long view we have to take.
In short, we need to think beyond 2019.
Of course, we have to.
Before opening the floor for questions, I think a lot of negativity and a lot of challenges we have discussed. To end on a more positive role, like every cloud has a silver lining, I find it very very happy when I see that a lot of people from science background, people like me, we have changed our professions and come into humanities. A lot of people are taking into Sanskrit studies, Shastra studies. There is huge interest in yoga, Ayurveda. So slowly but surely, at least in the soft power, as a soft power, there is definitely an emergence, a resurgence in Hindu civilization. Though on hardcore issues, society at large is still sleeping and unaware or turning a blind eye to the civilizational issues. So I would welcome any questions from the audience. Yeah, please.
After coming to power, it seems to me that Mr. Modi has forgotten all about Hindus. Not a single positive thing he has done. For example, Kashmir, abolition, resettlement of Kashmiri Pandits, temples are to be released from government control, common civil code, RTA Act, scholarship to economically backward Hindus. Not a single positive thing he has done. And moreover, education policy reforms. Mr. Javadekar claims that he has not changed a single line. Is it not shameful? What is the message they want to convey, and why should we honor them as Hindu Hriday Samrat in January to the next election 2019?
Well, that question is better addressed to someone who can speak on the behalf of the party. But the point is that, as I've said in the beginning itself, you can't expect these. It's very easy to sit and say a right to education should be repealed. But if you look into it, it's a very complex process, right? It's not easy to repeal right to education. It will take lots and lots of effort to do that. Now, the advantage of the other side is that if the Congress comes to power, they're ready with their 10 different laws and constitutional provisions and all, they will implement it. On our side, how much draft, have you ever prepared a draft about the right to education, how it should be changed or repealed? Have you ever given a single draft to the government? No, we don't do that. Have you ever given a constitutional roadmap, a legal roadmap to free the temples? No, we haven't given that. Right? On the other side, they're sitting with 10 different laws, lynching wala law and this law, that law. The moment Congress comes to power, within 10 months, they will implement it. Because Congress doesn't have to apply the brains. There's an ecosystem behind it. So it's easy to criticize, but I don't think that, it's better to have Mr. Modi ruling the country rather than Mr. Vijayan Piniyari ruling the country and getting your thousands of people arrested. Right? So don't underestimate that you have in the Northeast now the BJP government, and that has changed lots of things. They're not going to roll back everything in a single term or 2 terms, but the beginning is there. So it's better to have BJP ruling Northeast than some other party ruling the Northeast, in my opinion.
If there was one article that you would like removed from Constitution and one article that you would like added to the Constitution, what would it be?
I think it will be about the educational institutions, because in my opinion that has created lots of deadweight lost on the society. And what should be added to the Constitution? Don't know, can't say at this moment. But maybe guaranteeing more freedom of speech. I don't believe in absolute freedom of speech, but maybe, guaranteeing at least the maximum possible extent of freedom of speech, barring inciting of war against India, maybe.
I am not very much familiar with the various articles of the Constitution, but I would definitely say that the changes needed to be brought on is to treat the majority, the so-called majority of the country, on par with the minorities. So this is a huge very funny, I would say, that for 70 years still the minorities have the privileges that are not available to majority. Usually the assumption is the majority oppresses the minority. There is a institutionalized discrimination against the majority that needs to be rectified.
Now, who is the real is it the judicial activism or the Constitution? Who is the main culprit? Because judiciary is the watchdog of the Constitution and everyone swears by the Constitution. The Prime Minister, the Chief Minister, everyone. Today, the Bible is Constitution. Everyone says that. So now he asked only one article. I feel, I have heard Shankar Sharan's speech in the Sridhar Foundation. So I feel unless, the basic document, that is the Vidhi, basic document, that is... a relook is taken at it. I don't think much of it, whatever he raised the question, whatever achievements, the present government, I feel it's a Herculean task. Any government for that matter. So your response, please.
The judiciary has been appropriating more and more power because of the weakness of your political system and also of the executive. So everyone is feeding the judiciary. So even the current government is more than happy to dump all the difficult decisions on the government, on the judiciary. So whether it's the Rohingya issue, whether it's the Ram Mandir issue, when you are giving up, you are happy dumping a burden on the judiciary will grow in power. The Constitution does not have the concept of basic structure of the Constitution. Judiciary has invented it. And it's the problem of the legislature which has been unable to stand up and call the bluff. So I don't think that Constitution is responsible for this judiciary thing. And when you're talking about say, making large-scale changes in the constitution and all, say just again the same thing. We talk the things very easily, but constitutions and all, they are one document which come as a result of a long churning in the society, and they represent some kind of social contract which does not happen every century. So our constitution came into existence. Now you may disagree, agree with its provisions or not, as a result of a long struggle of the previous century. It was a social contract. Now if you want to change the social contract, there has to be major changes in the society itself, right? So France changes its constitution many a time, but they were followed by revolutionary or lots of chaotic period. So I don't think it's easy to change the constitution simply because we think so. Because once you start touching the constitution, you will be unleashing lots of social and political forces which you may not control, right? So we have to wait for the opportune moment. Maybe 200 down the line, there will be anyways lots of changes in the society. Maybe a new constitution will be written. Nothing is static in the world.
Nithin sir said that the rural masses, that they are more connected to the cultural these aspects. And Abhinav sir has said that more the urbanization, the society will gain more strength. So as we see that there are empirical evidence of both of them. So sir, where does this balance, means how to look after that, what is the optimum, because urbanization as per is an inevitable process. It is going to happen. But also we see that the rural mass, like Sabrimala case, we just saw that. So where is the balance? How can we just make sure that it is going the right direction? Thank you, sir.
I think the fact is, as Abhinav said, that we cannot expect the common people to have any deep knowledge more than commonsensical or very basic things. The problem with our system, today's system, is the education system, or the narratives built up in the media or academia, they are completely rooted on Western constructs, and this is where we need to change. So to bring about that balance, we need to change the entire discourse, the entire narrative. For example, instead of a discourse on rights as an absolute thing, we need to change the narrative into a dharma, which is a rights connected to duties. I mean, today we are playing the game, we are playing a colonial game. We are playing by their terminologies, their worldviews, their assumptions, and lot of baggage that they have imposed upon us. Now, it's not easy to just bring about our discourse out of the blue. Our traditions, we have a long knowledge tradition. We still have access to them, yes, but it's not possible to simply bring about them. There needs to be done, two things needs to be done. First, within their gameplay, we have to first bring about our own perspective, our own drishti, so to speak. Like in any issue, take for example, there is an abortion issue. In the West, it's a huge debate between pro-choice and pro-life. But that is a dichotomy, rooted in the Christian understanding. But in our own Dharma Shastra tradition, there is a middle path. There is a space where there is a clear understanding of the whole process of the childbirth, and there is a strong theoretical philosophy and outlook which is very plausible. But our laws, like it happened in the adultery recent issue I will take, the original law was Abrahamic, and its complete removal is also kind of Western. The problem and the solution is both imported from the West, without even discussing, without even opening the floor for discussion on what is our own drishti, our own view on the issue. It's not that we don't have a perspective on adultery or abortion or menstruation, any social issue. We have. The purpose of the Dharma Shastra tradition is to provide a theoretical and a practical framework to understand all the issues, social and personal issues. So it is this area where we need to work. When the Dharma Shastra tradition would be revived and we bring about the narratives of our theoretical frameworks into discussion to begin with, then the change would start happening.
Well, I largely agree to what Nithin is saying. Well, as you become more and more industrialized and urbanized, we should be ready that lots of customs and traditions will be lost. I remember a couple of years back, one of my cousin brother was getting married, and no one could sing in the gathering. One or two days before the marriage, you have all these customs and rituals and all, and virtually no one could actually sing the Avdhi song because we just don't know. I mean, our generation can't speak Avdhi. We can perhaps understand it, but can't speak it. Maybe my next generation will not even understand it. That is the price you will pay for getting more and more urbanized and industrialized, because that requires some kind of homogenization. The task will be that how do you coach, or how do you bring the old customs and traditions in the modern terminology. That is why I have been arguing for a long time that instead of talking only about the past, try to integrate the whole process of Hindu Renaissance, revivalism, Hindutva, whatever you call, with the process of modernization. Because if you are attached to the process of modernization, you can actually ensure the continuity of the traditions. Right now, we only have two models of modernization, that is the Western and the Japanese. The Japanese is too small to make an impact. There is no other third alternative to modernization, right? The China has been trying to do so. Islamic world is also trying to bring their own thing up. But I think we can do that much more easily. But we have not paid attention to that. So every time we only talk about Purane Samay mein kya tha, what was there in the ancient time, what was there in the golden age and everything, I say that's okay, but try to focus more and understand this complex socio-political transformation which we are already undergoing at present and which is only going to accelerate in the future.
I would just add one point. That time you were speaking about as a Shakta you cannot do animal sacrifice. This again, it's a very interesting. This again is imposition from a Western framework that says, that treats on one hand, treats animal sacrifice as a barbarous, inhuman or very outdated old practice. On the other hand, they have no qualms about, the British basically brought back the entire beef industry, and they have no qualms about killing animals for eating. But our side, you see the very presence of the various practice, the tantric tradition, even in the Vedic Yagya, there was animal sacrifice in the previous Yuga. So that is what we are told. And in fact, what our Shastras it says, is sacrificing an animal in a ritual is beneficial to the animal, but while eating the animal for your own personal purpose, it is not beneficial to the animal. It says even when you eat non-vegetarian food, you should first offer it to the deity and then eat, so that even that animal has some merit. So this is our tradition. So, but today the whole media, everything is against this animal sacrifice. It is again, we have completely interiorized these narratives, and we believe that this is our narrative. We have taken ownership of these Western narratives.
Yeah, okay, so that's a very complex thing. I mean, that's very difficult to actually argue in today's world unless you change the entire framework of the thinking, and which takes time and which is not happening anytime soon.
That should be the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that should be the goal, but I'm saying that is not happening anytime soon. But what I believe on the topic itself, that is the Hindu society under siege or on upsurge, I think siege is over. The armies are not surrounding your fortress now, but they're looking for the ways to undermine you still. So whereas the siege is over, the battle is still there.
We are in a kind of intellectual siege.
That Hinduism is not something just confined to the Indian nation today. It's virtually a global phenomenon. And that's something very obvious, say, if you attend a meditation program and you find the most ardent adherents of Hinduism are people of non-Indian background. The second point I'd like to make is that I myself am a non-Hindu by birth, but marriage was my open sesame to what Hinduism was all about and gave me a deeper connect with the idea of India. And what drew me to Hinduism was finally its scientific approach as I started studying things. For instance, that mantras are about sound energy, the concept of Shiva is the dark matter of the universe, and so forth. So I feel that if you have to retain your educated classes, you have to make that link with science and perhaps demystify Hinduism from its truly traditional roots. You have to kind of express it in a vocabulary that the modern person can understand and identify with.
My quick answer is I disagree about the need to explain our tradition in a scientific language, because our science is simply incapable of understanding our philosophical concepts. I'm sorry, but Shiva is not dark matter.
I agree, just an aspect.
Maybe an aspect, but that is an approximation at best. We cannot say, because we do not have a laboratory evidence, a certain Hindu concept is false or invalid, because the laboratory evidence itself is not equipped to analyze any of the Hindu concepts, any of the deeper concepts of Adhyatma. It may be Panchakoshas, it may be Vata Pitta, the doshas of the Ayurveda, it may be anything. This is another Western imposition, that Western notion of science is the only proper criteria of checking whether something is valid or invalid. But in our own tradition, we have different system of pramanas. We have Shastra Pramana, we have different kinds of Anumana, Upamana, all those things are there. The scientific validation is only one. It cannot be the only. In fact, it is inequipped to validate a large number of Hindu philosophical things.
Thank you. With this, we come to the end of the discussion, Hindu civilization under siege or on upsurge. May I request our senior member, Vice Air Marshal Ramesh Karnik ji, to hand over the mementos to our panelists. Mr. Nithin Sridhar. We'll just have a photo session.